I was really astounded to learn that not all humans originated on Earth. So let's kind of group people that are alive right now as like most of them are Earth native souls, like they've only been Earth humans. And then there's a smaller group of starseeds that have had lifetimes on in other star systems, mostly in this galaxy, but sometimes in several different star systems.
Welcome to The Reluctant Medium, where we cover the gamut of out there conversations. With an open mind and a curious heart, we want to talk about it all, from psychic phenomena and energy medicine to beings from other star systems and out-of-body experiences. You'll find a great balance between grounded science-backed topics and others that science hasn't quite caught up to yet. I'm your host, Dr. Maria Rothenberger, a psychotherapist by trade and a reluctant spirit baby communicator. And hey, even though I'm a medium, I'm not buying everything folks are selling. I just have a voracious appetite to know more about what I call the world of the weird. Join us on your favorite podcast platform or watch on YouTube at The Reluctant Medium. I'll see you there. Hey, if you are fascinated by topics like those talked about on The Reluctant Medium, consider following one of the top spiritual podcasts, Sense of Soul, with spiritual sleuth Shanna Vavra, where she has enlightening conversations with amazing lightworkers, authors, spiritual leaders, and healers from around the world who share their journey of finding their light within, turning pain into purpose, and awakening to their true sense of soul. Search for Sense of Soul, also from the Ethereal Network, on your favorite listening app, or go to mysenseofsoul.com. Hey, welcome everyone to the Reluctant Medium podcast. Today's guest is stinking phenomenal, and we are talking about a tiny bit of what he works on and is interested in. And so I'm so grateful to you, Derek Loudermilk, for joining me today, talking about galactic stuff 101. Welcome.
Good to be here. It's exciting.
I'd love to know first a little bit. Okay, so I read up about you, cyber stalked you a bit. Not really. I just looked at your bio. Oh my God, you run the gamut. But I would love to know how you define yourself. How do you want people to see you or know about you?
Yeah, it's so funny when I meet people at parties or whatever, then they ask what I do. I just try to give them something that's going to make the conversation get started. So either I tell them I'm a consciousness researcher or a business coach or an author or a professional adventurer. I put on all those hats depending on the situation. But really, I would say my work is all those things blended together. When I coach business, I'm doing applied metaphysics, and I'm also bringing in stuff I learned from being a pro athlete and a pro adventurer. So I've had a lot of experiences around the world, and probably in the last 7 years is when I went much deeper into the spirituality meets science aspect of things due to some magical experiences that I had on my journeys. And I'm just these days I'm doing some interesting trying to mash up, different metaphysical techniques that I've learned around the world, so that people can use them to benefit their life, their projects, their businesses that they're working on, things like that.
It's amazing, right? And I didn't know the timing of that it was about 7 years ago or so with the 800-year-old tree, right? Mm-hmm. Was that in Bali?
Yes.
That was that was the crux of it all, huh? Like that's the seed that started this all. Because okay, so I'm going to dispense with the modesty for you a little bit. This gentleman, you've probably lived like 1,000 you've probably literally lived 1,000 lives, but even like as Derek, you've lived 1,000 lives. You've done so many things, discovered a new virus. What? In Yellowstone?
Yeah, that was such a fun period of my life when the global financial crisis back in 2008, everyone was going back to grad school. I went back to grad school I wanted to learn about the origins of life, and viruses, you may know that they're the very simplest forms of basically like genetic material in a protein shell, like an M&M. And I was looking at these extreme environments, deep sea thermal vents, subglacial lakes and hot springs in Yellowstone. So I did a lot of my field work in Yellowstone. I ended up going around to 200 or more hot springs, some of which are boiling acid, some of which have various interesting characteristics. And I discovered a new virus. It was totally unrelated to any known existing virus, and it infects a single-celled organism that breathes iron and sulfur instead of oxygen. And so it's a very unique metabolism. And then the virus itself, lives within this single-celled organism. And it was so much fun for the most part.
Do you get to name it? That's such a weird question.
Yes. Yeah. But there's a naming convention. So it's Metallosphaera yellowstonensis spherical virus.
Oh my gosh. What? Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. Whoa. That is so cool. I mean, right. So you have worked deeply in the scientific realm, and then this magical thing happened, which I'm sure you can't get into every single detail, but is it possible to describe in a nutshell what happened to you there?
The magic tree.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there was actually a series of these mystical, magical experiences. The magic tree probably was the most profound, but I also witnessed a secret weather ceremony where I saw the Balinese basically turn on the rainy season. So I saw weather magic for the first time, stumbled across that in the middle of a world record attempt.
Oh my gosh.
And then the other event was when I was at the Angkor Wat temple in Cambodia, which is the temple to the sun. I was able to telepathically connect with the solar consciousness, with the sun. Both of those were actually before the magic tree. So the magic tree was the third event and the most profound. And it was a 30 to 45 minute telepathic out-of-body experience facilitated by this 800-year-old tree, where it projected my consciousness to another part of the world and taught me a bunch of lessons and gave me a bunch of suggested things that I should do going forward.
Oh, and as a scientist and adventurer who's firmly earth-based, right? You're exploring everything on the planet. How do you make that okay in your mind?
Yeah. So the first thing I was like, well, what an interesting experience. What's the explanation for this? This has to. So physics maybe is incomplete, or maybe I just don't know physics well enough. So I started just doing the research. Is there academic research that explains telepathy? Is there academic research that, would tie all this together? And it turns out there is a lot of great research. There's 80 years of solid telepathy and psychic research that I had no idea about. And most people don't. When you hear people say, well, that's never been proven, what they're probably basing that off of is nothing. Right? And if you go and do the academic research, there's actually tons and tons of evidence. And it's like, oh, okay, this is very cool. I also got really interested in the healing side of things. How does hands-on healing work? How does distance healing work? How do miracles happen? Things like that I was witnessing firsthand. For example, I had a healing with I wouldn't say he was a shaman. He's just a really interesting person I had a healing session with, and he pulled something out of my physiology, and all of a sudden in a clear blue sky, there was a thunderstorm right above us. And it was and it rinsed out all this energy that he had just taken out of my physiology. And I was like, well, that's weird. So all these just random cool things happening that I was just so curious about.
Yeah. Right. It sounds like you approached those kinds of experiences with a scientific mind. Like you went to look at the research, and it's true. There's so much actual evidence, and it's just not made mainstream for whatever reason. I'm sure you could theorize on that too, but we'll just say for now it's there.
I mean, the basic scientific process is you observe something in the world, you get curious about it and see if you can make a prediction, a hypothesis, and then you come up with a way to investigate that further. And so really, it's disappointing for people to think that's not science, because science is really just a process of inquiry. And that's how I've been applying my scientific training.
Yes. And you just have in general, a curious, open mind, it sounds like, right? You're an adventurer, which is scientific, really. Right?
The science of adventure. Yeah. Probably the going and living in cultures around the world, you learn that there's no one way to look at things. And so it sort of forces you to always be open-minded and be aware of where your biases and small frameworks of thinking could be, right? And then you're like, oh, I'm just like in this box that it feels like I'm not in my box, but I am in my box.
Yeah. Yeah. I like what you just said about when you're out adventuring, you have no choice but to be open because, right, you do get to witness and see how other people think, live, behave, all that, interact. It's amazing. Well, as much as I would love to go down that rabbit hole, really, I'm looking at some of the things that you wrote about because so you start out as this very, adventurous scientist, and then you invite in these other areas of inquiry, like past life stuff. And you listed a bunch of things on your website, on your About Me page around your past life experiences. And one of them is perfect for today. You have some memories around being an Arcturian general and Galactic Federation council member in the Orion Wars. In parentheses, where I first met my wife. What? So today we're going to be talking about that. So off-planet things and maybe on planet. You know a heck of a lot more about all this than I do. The reason why I'm so curious about this topic, this galactic topic, is because it's come up a lot in my work as a spirit baby medium. I don't know enough to speak to these things clearly, but I just give my clients what's coming through. And so I'll say, I don't know enough about this to expand, but here's what they're saying. And because it's come up so much lately, it's probably a prompting for me, to learn more about these things and to educate people. And so that's why I'm inviting you on today. And I appreciate what you have to say. So this is really Galactic 101, as I said. So what does that even mean? Galactic stuff. What does that mean?
Yeah. And let me see if I can. So a lot of this information has been told to me by people reading me. Many of these people we've shared other lifetimes together, and they remember them fully and can relate, because while I've studied telepathy and psychic skills and non-local consciousness, because my brain was so programmed into 3D, like I'm one of those people who doesn't have the natural psychic gifts like perhaps maybe you have. And so I actually have to work really hard to get channeled guidance or to get a telepathic connection. So I have bits and pieces, right? Bits and pieces of memories. A lot of it comes through dream time as well, like my Egyptian lifetime, my Arab lifetime, my Indian lifetime comes through dream time. And then a lot of it comes through other people relating it to me. And then it kind of like, oh yeah, I understand. I understand that lifetime, but I don't have like this huge collection of memories from it. I would love to be able to have complete recall of all of these lifetimes. It would be so useful and valuable, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's also facility for my learning as this version of me, as Derek, to not remember everything. Because if I had all that, like what's the point of coming to Earth and incarnating if you're just going to remember everything anyway?
Yep.
So there's a kind of a little preface, but I was really astounded to learn that not all humans originated on Earth. So let's kind of group people that are alive right now as like most of them are Earth native souls. Like they've only been Earth humans. And then there's a smaller group of StarSeeds that have had lifetimes on in other star systems, mostly in this galaxy, but sometimes in several different star systems.
Okay, I was wondering that too. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. And so a starseed is just someone who has lived other lifetimes outside of this Earth.
Yes. And so they would be native, like when their soul was created, it was created to be part of a certain collective consciousness, like the Pleiadians or the Arcturians, and like created really, really early on. And then those different groups, races, you might call them, of Pleiadians, Arcturians, Andromedans, etc., we as starseeds basically volunteered for this program to incarnate as Earth souls to be of particular type of assistance for the planet in this moment, in these decades. And it's an honor actually to be here. It's like we probably begged to have the chance to come here and experience all the chaos and lessons that we could handle on Earth right now.
It's so interesting to say it that way, right? But I feel the truth of that. I'll give you an example, of course, with confidentiality intact with a client of mine. This is the first time that came up in a reading. It was not a spirit baby reading. It was just an individual intuitive reading. And I just felt the need to connect to this person's greater self. And when I did, she presented as an extraterrestrial, just a different being. And I was shocked and awed and felt like lucky, almost, right? Like that feeling of, whoa, what? And then when I asked where she was from, she said Andromeda. Now, I had no idea. I don't know star systems. I just don't, except for Orion. And I'll say a little bit more about that, but later. When she said Andromeda, she showed me a character in a movie that I happened to know. The dog's name was Andromeda. And so that was the way that she got to me and told me my name. I'm from Andromeda. And then I later looked it up, and that's a thing. So just now when you said Andromeda, and I'm like, yeah, that's it. And so the thing is, the characteristic that I found with this particular person is that she felt completely uncomfortable being here on the planet. Now, I don't feel that way. I feel completely comfortable. But have you experienced that, or do you know of others that experience the discomfort of being on Earth?
I've heard of people saying like they feel like they don't belong here. My wife, for example, she was like, this is such a mess. Like, why can't people figure this out? It's just so obvious that, war is dumb, politics are dumb, all these things that do seem obvious to me as well. Yeah, I think people experience this yearning. For me, I have been so excited to be here my whole life. It's just like you mentioned, I'm trying to cram, because this could be my last lifetime here on Earth. So I'm trying to cram it as full as possible with experiences. So I never had that longing feeling. And partly it's because as I understand it, I've incarnated in so many different systems already that this is my first rodeo.
Right. Right. Yeah. So, because I wonder if that is an indication of how many times someone has incarnated here specifically in all the chaos. I wonder if that speaks to how comfortable they are on the planet or not. I don't know. But I'm also curious about where, so I know that I have a previous life, or that I'm a starseed from the Orion network of stars, specifically the right-hand star in the belt. Specifically, I know it.
Is that Rigel, or which one is that?
I don't know, to be honest.
Okay.
Yeah, I just know when I look up in the sky and I look at that constellation, that feels like home to me, specifically.
Yeah, one of my good friends is from there. He feels the same.
Really?
He just loves looking at the belt stars.
Yes, me too. It just feels like, not that it creates discomfort here, but it feels like home. Mm-hmm. So I'm wondering about that. Talk to me about, if you can, your starseed, where you're from, you're germinated from, starseed.
Exactly. Yeah. So originally I'm an Arcturian soul, okay. And I have incarnated as Sirian. I've incarnated as Orion. Particularly, so there's an aspect of my soul that is very strategic. So I've been a military leader in human lifetimes, in the Orion Wars, many, many times. And I see it show up in I'm a business coach, I'm a strategic advisor still. And so that's been a big part of my journey. And so my interaction in the Orion system is to take part in the Orion Wars, essentially. And basically the Orion Wars, Star Wars is the story of the Orion Wars. So the evil empire was real. And then the Rebel Alliance became what is now the Galactic Federation, basically to spread stability and peace, a defensive alliance in our galaxy. And so those Orion Wars were largely against a coalition of service to self beings, including the Draco reptilians and potentially a negative AI from a different galaxy. And I think also the Zeta Reticulan Greys formed this like coalition basically to take over and use resources, and then all the other planets in the Orion system trying to preserve their sovereignty and free will from that aggression.
Wow. Star Wars is real.
Yeah.
Wow. So this is beyond 101, but wow. I feel the truth of that, having been seeded from the Orion network of stars. So can you speak to, are there different characteristics for someone, say, who's seeded from the Arcturian star system versus Orion versus Andromeda? Or is there something in that, different characteristics as humans?
Yeah, certainly. And the sort of the way to think about this is, right, the field, the morphogenic field, that think of it as like the frequency that projects the physical reality as we perceive it. So we have like unique lifetime experiences, but the underlying field of the soul, the memories of the soul, are more fundamental than that. So if you have a whole collection of souls like the Pleiadians, which are very playful, creative, artistic oriented, there's a lot of like, they just like to do art and play games and be in community. So when you see somebody who's uber creative, focus on community, doing a lot of art, like my wife, it's like Pleiadian all the way. If you look at someone who's interested in systems and strategy and things like that, it's more likely to be an Arcturian, because we have this more like geometric way of mathematical way of looking at the universe. So there are certain characteristics. There's also certain like physiques and health influences that different star families may have. I believe the Orions have more trouble with their digestion and their nervous system, for example, when they incarnate as humans.
That would be true for me. Yep.
Interesting. Yeah. So yeah, there is like energetic, a base that can shine through into the physical.
Interesting. So yeah, and that was going to, or that I'll just ask it. That leads me into my next question around how someone figures out, or how can they identify if they are from a particular star system?
Yeah, there's a couple simple ways you could just get someone, presumably like you, to do a reading, or find out in dream time, which is how I would do it, which would be to fall asleep with the particular intention to be shown your original soul lifetime or your original incarnated soul group. And then write down your dreams when you wake up. And if you get little hints, a lot of people, when they start doing dream work, first you have to remember your dreams. So having a notebook next to your bed, getting ready to write them down, going to bed with the intention that you will remember, and then writing them before you start thinking about anything else in the morning. And then sometimes you may have to go in multiple nights, spend a week or 2 weeks asking the same question to really fill out the details. But sometimes you might get lucky and get like a full recall of certain situations you've experienced in another body. So for example, I had some fantastic dreams where I was incarnated as an Egyptian participating in building the pyramids. So I kind of know exactly what it was like when the pyramids were being built, which is super cool. And so that was just like these really clear dream sequences showing me that, because I was curious about that at the time. How did they do that? And then I was shown.
Can you tell us?
Sure. Yeah. There's two key aspects to building the pyramids. One, you have to make the stones lighter than air. Basically, you vibrate them until they become kind of these like floating mushrooms. So more than half of the atomic material is out of phase with this reality. So essentially you get these like really light floating blocks instead of heavy granite. And then they have to be moved using telekinesis.
Oh my gosh. Okay, that reminds me of a Thor movie where things are floating, like a whole vehicle is just up and floating and can be moved easily, either with the hands or I don't know about telekinesis, but I think they did it physically. But
yeah,
wow.
A lot of movies will attempt either through the creator's subconscious or through people with an agenda to disclose some certain information. So a lot of that will come out through entertainment.
Yes, I 100% agree. Thank you, Star Wars. Thank you, Marvel. Yes. Wow. Okay. So that's amazing. And so when you had the intention of connecting to your StarSeed history, can you tell us what came up? How did you identify Arcturian existence?
I first learned about this from another YouTuber, another podcaster, Elizabeth April, and we were having a conversation. She was like, "Oh, we're on the same defense council." And she's like, "Oh, now I remember making the agreement to meet up again in this lifetime to work together on a project." I was like, "Sweet, here we are." And this was like in an interview that we were doing. And she was like, "And you're an Arcturian on that council." And then that was confirmed by Debbie Solaris, the Galactic historian. But just always, like having it be like, yeah, feeling it in my body. Yep, that's me. That's right on. So
yeah, I love that you just said that, because it still brings it back down to your earthly experience. I feel it's right in my body. And people, when you practice this a lot, especially when you start in that theta brainwave state or delta brainwave state, that you're writing things down after you come out of that you feel the truth of things in your body. It's pretty cool. So you mentioned that, and I actually don't know if I was recording at the time, but you said that you had been on a recent, like a retreat or something, and this kept coming up, StarSeed stuff. People wanted to hear from you about it.
Yeah, just a ski trip that I went on with actually a bunch of other adventurers from around the world. One guy is really fond of Bulgaria, and he put together this amazing ski trip in Bulgaria. Most of us had never been to Bulgaria. And, it was so funny. Like, I don't try to have metaphysical conversations. They often just find me because somebody will say something weird and I'll be like, well, if you want, I can tell you about the science behind that. And they're like, yeah, please. So pretty much every night there was like metaphysical conversations, and starseeds would often come up. There was a couple there who had never heard of starseeds, but it was so obvious that they were a couple of Pleiadians. She's an influencer. She has this whole, like, she has an alien tattoo. She has like different is dope is one of her brands. And I'm like, yo, let me just show you like what Pleiadians are here and what they're up to. And they're like, oh my God, this is amazing. But it's also, I think, the perspective about what's going on right now. Like, why is the world so cuckoo bananas right now? And why would these want to incarnate here right now? Like, what does it mean to be of service in these times? Like, what is it that we're actually trying to accomplish here in terms of the ascension? So we had conversations about like, what is moving to higher density or what is moving to a higher dimensional awareness entail. And so just a lot of, you could see the puzzle pieces clicking together for people like, oh, okay, that actually makes me feel a lot better knowing that pandemics and currency collapse are actually kind of a good thing because there are signs of the change taking place.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I've even found that, I don't know, it probably is some sort of starseed thing, but I have every month a free Q&A with my peeps. And someone said, she takes really good care of herself. She's like, I've just been sick for like the last few weeks and I don't know what that is. And I just immediately knew she's going through a growth, like a spiritual growth period. And I feel that is also true for the planet. We're going through some kind of spiritual expansion. And it's so like, funny haha in a way to say
Mhm.
aliens have something to do with that, but it's also it just feels so true, like to really be of service, to come here on purpose in a chaotic environment to help support what's happening.
Yeah. And sometimes, so ascension symptoms are totally a real thing. And we take various supplements to try to buffer them because it can be pretty, like you can actually get a fever, you can be in bed for days, you can have, heart flutters, you can have all this stuff, which is there's no physical cause. It's just like your DNA is being upgraded and there's intense solar flares, like changing your personal magnetic field. All this stuff is happening and you can just be exhausted, you can be nauseated, all these things. So we are taking sulfur, magnesium, we have magnetite that we just got to protect, against the magnetic flux caused by the solar flares. Every once a week, we're taking activated charcoal to help with the detox, right? We're drinking as pure water as we can, all these things just to, like, the cleaner your physical system is, the easier it is to integrate moving to a higher density.
Oh my
in
God,
your physical body.
That is such great advice. Thank you. And again, bringing it back down to like the sciencey stuff, right? Like here are the practical tools that you can use to move through this spiritual thing. Can you talk a little bit about, you just used the word density. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah.
I think I'm feeling like that's connected to this StarSeed stuff.
This was kind of confusing at first when I was trying to discern what are dimensions and what are densities. So densities are harmonics of consciousness. It's a scale of consciousness. And as the universe experiences itself and learns lessons, the soul moves to a higher and higher density until it's fully integrated back into source. And right now, humanity and the planet itself are graduating from 3.12 density to 4.1 density as a collective. Now, there are people that are already well into fourth density, 4.1, 4.2, et cetera, and some people that are farther down into mid-third density. And this is it's just sort of a measurement of a experience and awareness. So there's no better or worse, but a main thing that happens in third density is that a soul chooses service to self path or service to other path, and then will continue evolving along that path up through the densities until finally it has to be resolved. At some point, every soul has to choose service to self to fully be integrated back into oneness. But you can basically progress through the densities on these parallel paths, like a duality path. I'm separate from you. I'm going to think of myself first. And so when you look around in the world and you see things like cheating, manipulation, fraud, coercion, mandates, etc., that's coming from a service to self path that they believe basically that they are separate entities and they have to look out for themselves first. And even if you're just slightly 51% service to others oriented, then you're more about love and connection and compassion and thinking of the good for the whole, facilitating the growth of the whole, the togetherness of the community. And so there's sort of these competing energies that we're experiencing a lot of on the planet right now. And that's why the few control the many to a large part. It's the few service to self controlling the many service to others. And as the earth and humans move up, then we're going to see this sort of bifurcation of these two paths of evolution.
3D will still exist, but it'll be more obvious.
The way that I think about it is that it will become two separate realities.
Okay.
To be integrated at a later time. So you'll have this sort of heaven on earth, fourth density reality, and then the continuation of the existing messy third density reality to be reintegrated as these people sort of continue to learn and progress through hardship.
Okay. I have one more question about that, and then I would love to ask about the difference between dimension and density. Do you think that StarSeed folks are functioning at a higher density, and that's why it's difficult when they come here, or it feels uncomfortable, or is it varied?
Yeah, exactly. So their higher self, right, is a much higher density, probably. So Pleiadians and Arcturians, I think you would consider to be fifth density beings individually. And then a sixth density would be the whole collective, like all the Orion souls together would be a sixth density type energy collective. And so, yeah, you have to become more dense. You have to lower your frequency in order to experience Earth. And that's how channeling works as well. Like the human channel has to raise their frequency to this point, and then the higher dimensional being would have to lower their frequency to match it enough. And so, yeah, I think probably people could feel discomfort, right? Having to sort of experience a more dense situation.
Okay. So that implies that someone can, with intention, raise their vibration. They can increase their density a bit. Is that accurate?
Yes. So the Hawkins scale of consciousness is a great map of this. Basically, it's a logarithmic scale of emotional experience. So 200 is neutrality. And so below that, you have things like fear and shame and despair and even pride are below 200. And then you have things like acceptance, rationality, and then love, joy, enlightenment, sort of going up towards, on this particular scale, is 1,000. And that's kind of what you would experience incarnated in physical form. So the emotional state is there's a frequency that underlies that state that can be calibrated and measured.
Oh, that's very cool. I'm going to link up to that. That also reminds me of the Heart Math Institute, the work that they're doing there with frequency and noting the changes in the heart when one feels certain ways. That's fascinating stuff. Okay. More rabbit holes to go down. So can you talk about the difference between density and dimension?
Yeah. So dimension then would be, it's more like a location. So you're placing yourself here. We're able to place ourselves in length, width, depth, and time in 4 dimensions. And as you go, I believe there's 12 dimensions. And so that's more of like just the description of how you place the location of consciousness, the point of awareness. It's more of a physics perspective than a consciousness frequency perspective.
Is that the whole, of course, I'm going to go back to Marvel, the multiverse thing? They're different. Is that different than dimensions?
We're getting to a point where my brain starts to short circuit, but I believe that's different. So you can have parallel universes that have the same dimensional structure, but have a different way of experiencing reality.
Holy moly. So there could be different universes within each of these 12 dimensions, many, many iterations of.
Yeah. And so when a soul gets back to source, they have the opportunity to create a new universe. So you go from an experiencer of this universe to the creator of your own new personal universe, as I understand it. And so some of the trouble that we've had, like in the Orion Wars, with the Draco reptilians and the AI, both of those, I believe, slipped over or were kicked out in some way of their original universe. And sort of because they were causing too much trouble, they were like an infection in their universe and were kicked out into our universe. And we've been sort of fighting them off ever since.
Wow. Oh my gosh, this is like a movie. And now my brain is short circuiting. There's so much to know. Holy cow. So anything else that you would like to share about, really what came up in these inquiries that people had on your ski trip, what people were curious about? Because I suspect that most people, especially, that don't know anything about this, what they're curious about.
Yeah, perhaps, just like, why would StarSeed want to come here at this time? And here to be of service. Okay, great. Also here to gain massive more experiences for themselves, right? There's a bit of selfishness. If you can, okay, let me back up. This is Earth right now I've heard it described as the group of beings that have gone farthest into separation. That is like forgetting our connection to source more than any other situation ever before. So we're like farthest into separation and we're on our way back. And everyone wants to find out if we can come back from that. And so it's like the most challenging possible situation you could have in an incarnated form to find your way back to divinity from full separation. And if you can participate in that, so a lot of these races, like the Arcturians, are largely non-physical. They can create like a plasma body form, but they're largely not in bodies anymore. And so to be in a human body during this time of like great trial and tribulation, there's lots of soul evolution that can come from that, a lot of benefits in terms of learning. So that's one benefit for coming here. But the side of it that is to be of assistance is simply anchoring in a way of being. That is, there's nothing to do. You just have to be. And this is one of the hardest things for people that have been programmed in a capitalist society, which says like your worth is your productive output. Your contribution is like what you produce. The StarSeeds are here to just be who they are. And that's it. That's like the highest service. And of course there's actions, right? Like, of course there's, maybe you're playing the piano or creating art or running a business or whatever it is, like the stuff that you do. But fundamental to that is just being. And so if you're a StarSeed, or really anybody, like even if you're an Earth human, your worth, like you could just be sitting in a chair at peace. And that is perhaps the most valuable thing you could be doing, right? When I look at my kids just running around laughing, like there's no need for them to do anything. Their value is in them just expressing themselves naturally. And I think that is one of the most profound lessons for myself and for StarSeeds is like, you don't have to do anything. You just have to be yourself as well as you can be.
Oh my gosh, drop the mic right there. And I'm just thinking of myself as a parent going, you need to clean your room. You have to do this. You have to do that. But so I'm not going to let my kids listen to this. No, just kidding. Wow. Derek, thank you so much for these insights. And I hope that people take things like this away from it. It's so much more, very interesting, but there's so much profundity to it, right? Like your actual role is to simply be your highest expression of yourself. That's be and not do. So wonderful. So for more fantastic content like this, and like 100,000 times more than that, you just cover so much in your work. Where's the best place for folks to find you?
Yeah, thanks. The Derek Loudermilk Show is my own podcast, audio and on YouTube. DerekLoudermilk.com, Derek Loudermilk on all the social media. So I'm pretty much the only one out there talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
With my name.
Simply Google and they'll find pages of stuff. Obviously, I'm going to link to all those things in the show notes. And I'm looking forward to helping you spread this stuff far and wide. So thanks again. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Reluctant Medium podcast. As always, I hope you were able to glean at least least one useful nugget from today's podcast episode, if not two. And if you like conversations and topics like this, consider joining the Miracles Happen community, where we talk about all kinds of things like this, and it's free. I'll say that again. It's free. Come on over to miracleshappencommunity.com or download the Mighty Networks app on your phone and search for Miracles Happen Community. Join there. It is completely free. And every first Friday of every month, we have another free event where we all get together and talk on Zoom, and you get a free mini reading by yours truly. Come join us, miracleshappencommunity.com. It's free. I can't say it'll be free forever. May as well join now. And if I don't see you there, I'll at least catch you on the next episode of The Reluctant Medium. Until then, take care.